As a man goes the household. As the household goes, so goes society.
Welcome to Dominion Roundtable. We are here to talk about our books. And since everyone loves Tolkien,
almost everybody
loves Tolkien. Chris is the one angling for the popular vote here.
Except I may have the most unpopular character in the whole thing, as well as the most popular character.
Yeah, so whatever possessed you to write a book about Tom Bombadil?
Well, like a lot of folks, I was curious, what is this guy about? He doesn't seem to fit in the story. He doesn't seem to serve the plot in the way that most folks think a character should. And yet there he is. He's in the book. And as I thought about him and reflected on him, I thought, there's a lot going on here that Tolkien was up to that I'm not sure people are catching.
Right.
And so I thought, well, I'd like to dig into it. And it actually has a lot to do with dominion and its proper exercise, as opposed to domination, which is what Sauron and Saruman were up to.
Right.
And so I thought, wow, man, this actually kind of even ties into some stuff I've written about before. So I thought, I guess I should do it.
Okay, so I was interested in looking at when Goldberry says he's the master, Tom Bombadil's the master, and we're talking about the words dominion and domination as being two different, same root but two different concepts. Right. It'd be the same with master and mastery.
Yeah.
Right. There's a good kind of mastery, of course, but Bombadil is sort of organically the master.
Yeah,
he cuts with the grain.
Right. Yeah, I think that's key. I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, he's the word master in some contexts just simply meant teacher.
Right.
So like back in Boston, there's a school called Roxbury Lat, which is the oldest private school in America, and they still fly the Union Jack. It's an amazing place to kind of check out. But when you drive up to the campus, there's the Union Jack, and all the instructors are called master. So I don't know if that's still the case. Maybe they finally succumbed to PC, but that was the case back in the 90s when we were considering sending our oldest son there. But getting back to the point, master, I think obviously Tolkien was a philologist. He knew about the origins of words, and he knew that master didn't necessarily connote what people think it does.
Right. When we think of authority in the modern world, authority, headship, people automatically think despotism, evil, tyrant, right?
Right.
And that would come up in your book, right? If men are to have authority or to have dominion in their homes, that's very different than being the boss man who comes home and demands his supper at 6, right?
Yeah, like what I saw in your book, and I heard you give a talk on it a while back, and the dominion versus domination paradigm was really helpful. Because what we're calling men to is a restored nature, right? So having that grace doesn't obliterate, it doesn't even elevate, but it restores nature, right? And that whole idea in your book of Bombadil, where the other guys, right, the servants of Mordor, are trying to pick everything apart and make it mechanical, whereas Bombadil is at peace with nature, right? With God's cosmos, right? We should write a book on that, by the way.
It's a great idea.
But there's a potential for a trilogy here, I say. But yeah, that's very much at the core of what we were writing, which is God's design is good, marred by the fall, but still present, and needs to be redeemed, restored by grace. And so it all plays in there, yeah, very much.
And one of the ways we redeem it is by not running away from false accusations or imputations. So, for example, the title of your book, "It's Good to Be a Man." Somebody's going to come up and say, "What? You're saying it's bad to be a woman?" Well,
it's amazing how people can actually take that and say, are you actually saying that it's the only good thing in the world?
Yeah, right. Well, it's bad to be a woman if there's someone out. A prowler outside or a spider in a bathtub sometimes.
It's bad to be a woman if you're not one.
Yeah, that's especially true in the head of health departments. But yeah, very much that we wanted to focus on what God's design and not to be ashamed of it, not to be ashamed of masculinity. Obviously, it's good to be a woman as well. That's like Genesis chapter 1, basic
Right.
things. This is part of God's cosmos, and He's made things. And we're being trained to be ashamed of the way God has ordered the world. We're being trained to be ashamed of hierarchy and the created order and all that. And when it's reordered according to the lordship of Jesus, it's wonderful, right? It's a
Right.
good thing.
So we're so afraid of counterfeits that we've rejected the use of real money for the sake of
exactly.
avoiding counterfeits. So in Gashmu saith, there's that phrase. I should probably explain the title. Gashmu saith.
Gashmu, I know who that is.
Yeah.
It's the killer whale at the SeaWorld in Turkey. Gashmu. I didn't know he talked.
Yes, he speaks archaic English. It's a wonderful little line in the King James Version in the book of Nehemiah, where Nehemiah is being told by his opponents that everybody knows you're setting yourself up to revolt against the king, and Gashmu saith it. So this character, who is this guy? It makes his way into sacred scripture as being an unnamed online critic.
Guy who leaves comments in your blog.
Yeah,
an authority.
Just think YouTube commenter.
But it is interesting that he obviously has an agenda. He doesn't want this wall built,
right?
And he's using an argument that's not his own argument. He's appealing to some other authority to say you shouldn't do that, but it's actually his own self-interest that's being served when he says that.
Right. So your book is addressing individual men. You say that this is not a marriage book, although it affects marriage. This is not a parenting book, although it affects parenting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's for individual men who grew up fatherless, let's say, or functionally fatherless, who don't know what it is to step into manhood. And then that's sort of a prerequisite to taking on other responsibilities, like being a husband, being a father,
that's right.
Whatnot. But you're addressing men in that role. It seems that you're addressing more of a broader cultural thing, like Saruman, and that we could probably get into how we pronounce names here. Saruman.
Right.
But he had a mind full of gears and wheels and smokestacks. That's a certain cultural vision, right? Yeah. But the elves were artisans. They made things with their hands. Yeah. The problem was not that Saruman manufactured things. Yeah. It was how, right? And Bombadil is sort of the preeminent example of someone who's in tune with the world the way it is. Yeah. And it's the whole created order. And my book is addressing dominion in a community, like a small community, a church or a Christian community. And every one of them is going to be slandered. Like you want domestic abuse and what else? And I want to I want to found a cult. We want a cult, and this over here would be unfettered capitalism. Is going to
Yeah, I think one of the things that I was hoping to address in the book is there's a kind of story or kind of approach to interpreting Tolkien that is related to the Ring of Power. So the Ring of Power is bad, right? And that I think some people have taken that to imply that power itself is bad,
right?
And that's not the case. I mean, one of the points I try to make in the book is that, or bring out is Bombadil may be the most powerful character in Middle Earth, even though he may be a match for Sauron.
Right.
And he's powerful. He does some really amazing things in the story. Right. And Gandalf's powerful, Aragorn's powerful. And so power is not the issue, not bad. It's power in a particular mode.
Power how?
Yeah. Yeah, and power how it's acquired. So, that episode with Gandalf and Saruman, when Saruman captures Gandalf, it's kind of a revelation with regard to Saruman's method for acquiring power, and his desire is to impose his will on the world. His will, his understanding of what would be a good thing, imposed on free creatures. He needs to break those creatures. He needs them to. So when we know a little bit about Tolkien's politics, he actually described himself as a bit of an anarchist. And I think today we'd probably call him a libertarian. He might even called himself a libertarian.
Right.
But his problem wasn't with power. Power is all around us. It's doing all kinds of great things. Power of a husband, father, man, is a good thing.
Yeah.
And what we see in Bombadil is what unfallen dominion looks like. Domination is fallen. What dominion looks like when it's fallen. But what you see in Bombadil is a picture of what dominion looks like as intended.
A thread I see in the 3 books is it's not whether but which. That whole idea. It's not whether men will rule. They will. It's God's design. It's not whether we're going to build communities around religion. We're going to. And so part of what I think we have to move towards, like you mentioned, these books are going to be slandered without a doubt. But what I like about your book is that it's not like this guy says this, that's wrong. This guy says this is wrong. This is your read of Bombadil, and you're writing it out. It's like a positive. What we wanted to do with our book was make a case for biblical masculinity and why it's good and why it's being attacked. And instead of framing it as here's what Amy Bird said, and here's why she's wrong, or whatever, I didn't want to spend all my time writing a book that's reactive. I want to make people react to me.
Well, here's what you don't want to have happen. 200 years from now, when people say, we got to go back and research Michael Foster and his book. Who's this Amy Bird person?
Yeah.
You don't want them like digging up her stuff, to say, oh, okay. You just want to do what you want to do.
What's this Let's Go Brandon thing on Twitter? What's it all about? Yeah.
So one of the things I think is going on with Bombadil, you cite Tolkien as recognizing that Bombadil requires an explanation. And Tolkien says outright, he's in there for a reason. And he doesn't expressly state what that reason is, but I think you do a good job in teasing out what that likely is. But it struck me that it was a good example of Tolkien's self-awareness of his own personality predilections, because Bombadil is about as unlike Tolkien as you could possibly be. Right. Tolkien is the only, I love the books, but he's about the only writer I know of who could make going to heaven sad.
That's
right. We all go down to the Grey Havens, and there's Celtic music in the background, and there's leaves blowing across the thing, and we all go off to the endless joy.
Very melancholy.
It's a real melancholy. It's a very effective and very potent, but then Bombadil comes in. Blue and yellow and a splash of color against a very gray, solemn.
Well, you were the one that actually brought that to my attention. That the prevailing color in The Lord of the Rings is gray.
Right.
So I said I got to check this out. So I got out my Kindle, typed in gray. Sure enough, it is the most. It's the color that's
gray rocks, gray eyes, gray.
Yeah, it's everywhere. And then Technicolor Tom. It's almost like. Like Wizard of Oz. You land in Oz and all this color. Tom shows up and all this color.
Right. And if we could take that as a metaphor for what we ought to be doing, and I would like to, we'd want men to become a splash of color.
That's right.
In a very gray world. Mm-hmm. We would like Christian communities to become an explosion of color in a very gray world, but you can't do it by imitating Saruman. You've got to understand what the internal logic of it is.
Yeah, my friend Glenn Sunshine makes a point of addressing the subject of color in the medieval world. The Middle Ages were very colorful. Mm-hmm. I mean, in terms of what people wore, how they, their arts, all that kind of stuff. Everything was just color everywhere. But if you see, what Peter Jackson did with Lord of the Rings, or if you see what, I guess, who's the guy that does the Oh, what's it? We should probably edit this part out.
No, we're just going to leave you out there.
That's it. But anyway, but I think when people think about the medieval world, they don't think color.
Right.
They think gray. Now, maybe that's what
Dark Ages.
Yeah, Dark Ages.
Dark Ages.
Yeah, so maybe some. Now, I think that Tolkien was up to something pretty profound when he was using the color gray, because I think what he was saying is that sin has had a graying effect on things and on creation itself, even. Anyway, but I've gone down that road and enough.
So, come back to your book. What do you think? I mentioned earlier, you're tackling the problem of fatherlessness. You say early on in the book that, all right, so you didn't have a dad, didn't have a father. You can't really fix that with YouTube clips.
Yep, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
But you can do something. It's not like it's something that can't be redressed.
That's right.
What would you say men who don't know how to be a man, or don't know how to be a good man, or don't know that it's good to be a man, what would you say they should do?
I mean, step one, this is why guys are listening to Jordan Peterson or Jocko Willink or Joe Rogan to a lesser extent, is that all of these guys preach take responsibility for yourself. And I think the where you break free is when you stop being a victim. And that's why the gospel is so powerful,
Right.
because you have to own that you're a sinner before God. You broke his law. You're not right with him,
Right.
and you have to repent. And so you start taking responsibility for your life. And it doesn't mean bad things have happened to you, right?
Right.
Like not everything's your fault.
Yeah.
But once you take
welcome to Earth, right?
Yeah, right. But now when you take responsibility for yourself and start somewhere. And so we give some examples of it, but I think of it like a bike chain, where it like falls off the bike and you put the one around the one little gear, and then you put it on there and you start to turn the pedals and the chain pops on. And what guys need to realize is that there's not going to be turn-by-turn GPS instructions for manhood. It's supposed to be caught from other men, fathers, uncles, mentors through life. And if you haven't had a lot of that, the only way to do it is to throw yourself into life, to pursue these things. And it's in the action of doing these that we develop virtue.
Join a church, go where men are.
Yep. Yeah. Work hard, get a vocation, but develop skills. I think one thing I picked up from Chris is, I urge my sons to be a good, competent at 1,000 things and experts at, one or two things.
Right.
So start to build these things. Learn how to tie a tie. Learn how to change your oil. Right. Learn how to outline a book of the Bible. There's so many things, but start developing skills and pursuing those things with other men. And that's really where things take off.
Yeah, I think we live in a culture today where the victim is what you want to be.
Yeah.
For a lot of folks. And if we want to see that reversed, then we need to have men say, I'm not a victim.
Yeah.
I'm going to take responsibility for my life. And I think that can be caught, and it can kind of create a kind of reverse sort of process where that outlook can spread. In my own case, I know you were without a father, right, as a kid?
My dad loved me. But he had an 8th grade education.
Oh, okay.
Struggled with alcohol, and
got it.
So he was there, but he didn't give me much. He gave me what he had.
Right. Yeah, I didn't have anything like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, there were men in my life, largely through the church. I was converted in a little blue collar church in Western Pennsylvania, where everybody changed their own oil, including the women. It was just that kind of world, and everybody had a big garden. Everybody worked in a factory. I mean, guys would come to church and talk about being in the smelter. It's working in 120 degrees, and that kind of thing. And there was just this sort of remarkable competence I saw all around me.
Yeah.
These guys knew how to do everything. They'd pull the engine out of their vehicle. They'd, put an addition on their house. And then they'd, go out and, shoot a deer. They just did everything, And what I saw in that was stuff that I really thought was great and admired, and I respected those guys. And hopefully a little bit of that was kind of osmosis, for me. Because that's not the world I came out of. I came out of a much more sort of bohemian, academic, artsy world.
As I've studied the topic and look back and say, how did I not get stuck in this myself? It really was that. It was there was a lot of men that spoke in my life, mostly from the church. I remember I wasn't a Christian yet, but I was like flirting with the idea. And this guy, he knew my parents were going to this weird charismatic church. And he said, "Oh, you're Don and Fred's son." I was like, "I am." And I shook his hand and I gave him the dead fish. Right. And he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "Son, never do that again. That's not how you shake someone's hand. Let me show you." And you know what? I never did. It was really helpful because there was like, he didn't make, he made me feel ashamed, as he should, but not in a vindictive sort of way. It's like, let me show you how to do this. Right. And when you have guys that teach you how to read the Bible, how to pray, how to fix things, how to talk to a woman, how to calm down, you know, all those things add to you, and they take in a way that you just can't absorb via like podcasts or even books to some degree, because God made us to be in relationship with one another, you know?
So there's there are two alternatives. Like there's the Tom Bombadil way and the Saruman way. There's dominion and there's domination. There's the man who's a leader in his home and the head of his home and has true gospel authority in his home. And then there's the domineering tyrant, right? But we are in a culture that has largely abdicated the whole concept of dominion. There are dominators out there. But there are, you mentioned earlier, the Jordan Petersons, and so there you've got this whole generation of fatherless boys, or turning into young men, or boys who shave now. You know,
right. Sure.
They've not matured. So there's a small cottage industry of people. You know, the manosphere, the
life coaches, dating coaches,
life coaches,
Gumroad courses,
all
give us money. Yeah.
Right. So, and as I've interacted with some of it, I'm read some stuff by Rollo
Tomasi,
and it's a mixture of absolutely appalling.
Yep.
And how come gospel preachers don't know this?
Right.
Yep.
Like what an astounding insight.
Yeah.
That's really, really good. And this is horrendous.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with the alternative, the opposite of what we're trying to inculcate, but we're also up against people who by common grace have bits and pieces, right? And who are saying helpful things and awful things. And it's a sort of a mixture. Would you say that what we're doing here is trying to provide an orthodox, biblical, exegetically grounded case that will scratch the itch that these unbelieving life coaches are trying to get at?
I think so. I mean, I didn't know this thing was going to take off and turn into a book. You know, I had no clue. I've talked to Rollo before, and I told him, I don't know how he liked this. I don't think he liked it. But I said, you know, everything in your book, the cumulative knowledge of it, I could find in a 1920s bar. Right. You know what I mean? And it's because there's a sort of cultural tsunami where you have waves go out and come in, and they would come in and they would rip things away and carry them out to sea, come in, rip more. And so each generation, things that we grew up with, even at this stage of 41, things that I assumed they're just gone. Right. And you don't even realize they're gone because people are so given to making excuses when young men say it's not like that. You're like, you know, I think maybe it's just not working hard. And then you're like, well, no, there's like real changes. And so these guys are waking up. You're seeing it happen all across the country. I mean, the Jordan Peterson sort of moment really is pretty significant. But his answer is not, I don't like Peterson that much because I feel like he's scared of God's world. He's like, it's a cruel, horrible place. There's still a sort of nihilism to it, as opposed to like God made this world for us to live in. He made it for us to rule over, and it's his desire for us to shape it. I think it's a really different mindset. So I think, people are ready for this. And what I've seen in the manosphere as I've become acquaintances and even friends with these guys is that hedonism is empty. Like falsehood is bad. Truth is good. And as they've given themselves to different of these elements, it's destroying their life. And I'm watching these pickup artists saying, maybe I should get married. Maybe I should stop doing this. And so I think there's we're at some sort of strange point in history right now. There's some weird spiritual awakening happening. And I think this is good. And the church has the answer. And these guys have just been observing the creational design of things that we can observe with our own eyes, but it's stated explicitly throughout scripture. So we have this huge treasure trove of what, like Proverbs. You want to know how to be a man? Proverbs. It's like the whole point of the book. And so, yeah, I think these things are going to become more common, and they're going to spread through the church. And soon we won't need podcasts on manhood. That's the goal.
It's interesting. The Hebrew verb to speak a proverb is also the verb to rule.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And there's basically dominion wisdom in the book of Proverbs, and the book of Proverbs is written to a young man. It's an older man coaching, teaching a young man to stay away from the painted ladies. Don't become a lazy bum. You know, here's how you change a tire. Yeah. Here's how you rotate the tires.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I want to go back to Bombadil for a moment. If and maybe ask about the catchphrase in evangelical circles, in complementarian circles, and you don't call yourself that. You're
I don't know how to spell it. It's like impossible.
It's not even a word.
Yeah, autocorrect dooms me every time. So like I gave up.
So let's go back to the factory settings and call it patriarchy.
Yep.
Right. So we go back to factory settings and patriarchy, and the catchphrase I had in mind was servant leader. So the complementarian world wanted husbands to be the servant leader in the home. And that strikes me as a desperate attempt to soften what the Bible says, because nobody talks about servant Lord.
Yep.
Okay. Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. She, okay. Well, wouldn't the doctrinal basis be covered if we called the husband the servant Lord? Yes, but don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah,
right. Or servant master. Well, Bombadil, there's nothing in Bombadil's experience that throws him. Right. He comes across a tree eating some hobbits, and he just
stop that tree.
and he tells the tree to knock it off. They get caught in the barrow, and in the barrows, and he comes in. He just comes into every situation, knowing what to do. It's like
he's got skilled mastery for sure.
He's got skilled mastery. He's not thrown by anything.
And Goldberry calls him the master.
Yeah,
she calls him the master without any equivocation. I know she just says he's the master, and then he kind of on cue walks into the room. He's got a crown of leaves in his hair.
Right.
He is the master.
Right.
And I don't think she has any problem with him being the master.
We wouldn't dream of calling Bombadil a servant leader.
Yeah, definitely
right.
not. Yeah.
That's not what he is.
Right.
But at the same time, he's not scary. Nobody's when they're in Bombadil's presence, nobody's looking for a safe space. He is the safe space.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when we're up against the lies of feminism and the lies of egalitarianism, one of the first things that we said is what you're arguing for is toxic masculinity.
Sure.
What you're urging is toxic patriarchy, and we need a safe space. But shouldn't our argument be your safe spaces aren't safe? You're miserable in there.
Yeah.
And the actual safe space is God's design.
That's right.
The goodness of God's design.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that is almost unexamined by a lot of folks is I think the reality that that on the left, political left, you have a lot of domineering people, controlling people. So this idea that you can kind of escape domination by going into that world is, I just don't think, empirically sound. There's just a lot of freaky controlling people out there. So what we're talking about is, when we talk about freaky controlling people, and we've all run into those people, is that it's not sort of like a problem that's limited to a particular community. It's everywhere. You can find freaky controlling people.
Yeah. William F. Buckley defined a liberal as someone who when you're taking a shower reaches in and adjusts the temperature for you. Adjust the temperature for you.
Man. Right. But you see, that's the thing. I don't like the word management, and because management just never stops. Rule, on the other hand, is a whole different sort of practice. The management. Now we need managers. You know,
Sure.
I'm not saying that management is necessarily a bad thing, but managers just never stop messing with you. They're always messing with you.
Right.
Whereas with rulers, basically, we see it in Scripture. Don't maybe come down there.
Right.
It's like when you get in the Old Testament, so whenever it says the Lord came down, it's not a good sign.
Yeah. Or Paul saying, I can come with a rod, but I would don't make me. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. C.S. Lewis has a essay somewhere where he talks about this very thing. Rulers. He much prefers the term rulers to leaders in the civic realm.
Yeah.
He doesn't want leaders. He wants rulers.
Yeah.
Because the rule can be defined. This is your province, and stay out of the rest of it. Leaders are tempted to constantly fuss.
Yeah.
Well, we have to be going somewhere where I can be leading you all the time. Leading you all the time.
Yeah, a good ruler doesn't mess with you if everything is good.
Right. So I mentioned earlier that in your book, your book is not how to get a wife.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
It's more how to be the kind of man that a good woman would want to be with.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's right.
So what are the preconditions for going to find a wife?
Yeah, so it's hard to have submission without mission, right? So when you're trying to call a woman to submit to you, you hear this a lot, and this even the weird side of the patriarchal stuff. If you're not going anywhere, you don't have anything for her to come help you with, right? God makes Adam and then brings Eve to help him fulfill the creation mandate.
Right.
So this is why we focus on mission, which is kind of a little bit ambiguous. And I know it's going to frustrate the autistic folks out there, but nonetheless, it's the idea of like using all the skills that God's given you, providentially where He's placed you, to do Catechism 1, right? Well, like live to glorify God and enjoy Him forever in your thing. So get moving somewhere. The problem with a lot of guys is that they make the woman the mission, right? And a woman doesn't want to be the center of your universe. She wants to be brought to a worthy man that's doing something. This is why I always tell guys, like why a woman gets on the back of the motorcycle, the jerk, is the jerk looks like he's going somewhere and doesn't need her to be a man. She wants to be part of that. Now that's not what's going on there, but that's how it's read. Right. So what guys can do is first off start developing the skills, wisdom, strength, workmanship. Wisdom, like understand the world you're in and how to apply the truth of Scripture. Workmanship, actually your ability to shape and things, whether it's code or a piece of wood, right? And strength, the ability to bear the load of the responsibility that God's given to you.
So Paul says in Corinthians that the man was not made for the woman, but the woman for the man.
That's right.
So Adam was made for dominion, for the garden, and to turn the world into a garden. That's right. Adam was created with a mission, and Eve was created to tend the gardener. So that's right. He was created to tend the garden. She's created to tend the gardener. And so man's not made for the woman, but the woman for the man. And you can see this there's a deep structure to this, because if you read a book, and it could be a Safeway Western, Louis L'Amour, or a great, the Odyssey. If you read a book by a man written for a male audience, what's the book about? Well, it's about the guns of Navarone.
Yeah.
Right. It's about the mission, or finding the gold, or winning the battle, or getting the cattle back. It's about the mission. And then in the Louis L'Amour novel, the love interest enters, plucky rancher's daughter. She comes in, and what's her role? Well, it's to help him to get the cattle back. Right. So he's got a mission. She's it's oriented like this. But if you do the face-to-face thing, which is how a book written by a woman for women, and it could be great literature like Pride and Prejudice, or a Gothic romance type of thing, the relationship is the plot.
Yep, that's right.
first they kind of like each other, then they don't like each other, then they like each other again.
Oh, that's comes down to communication strategies that guys don't get. When a woman's telling you something, she tells you all these things, and you're like, "Where is this going? Like, what's the punchline?" But the punchline is, "This is how I experienced my day, and I'm sharing with you my day." Right? Where a guy wants it to be mission oriented, like, I want there a punchline, I want there to be something you're directing me towards, and you have to learn. A good husband learns to speak woman, or at least to listen to woman,
Yes,
right?
listen, yeah.
And that's because there's these deep differences. Like women, their job is to knit together society, knit together nurture.
So this point you're making is something I go over routinely in my pre-marriage counseling.
Good.
You're
You're helping a lot of men.
You're entering a bilingual world. What both of you are listening to is something that sounds like English, but it's not English to the other person. And so, guys, and I always have to qualify this, even though it's November. I'm generalizing, but guys don't like to ask for help, and they don't like to ask for directions. But they can be prevailed upon if they've got enough of a trouble. They can go down the hall at work and talk to their friend about, I'm having trouble fixing this carburetor. I'm having trouble writing this with this code or this software program. Or I'm having trouble with a teenage son. And when he goes and talks to a male friend about the trouble he's having, the words that he most wants to hear in the whole world are, have you tried
XYZ?
Because when he's got a trouble and he goes and asks for help, he's looking for a solution.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when a woman has troubles, she's not looking for the solution primarily. She's looking for a companion.
That's right.
Right? So this husband comes home and his wife has had a terrible day and all trouble. And she pours out, they're having a conversation afterwards, and half an hour of laying out how awful the day was, all the troubles she's had. And then he, poor chump, says, have you tried?
Yeah. Well, I could tie this all.
You're not listening.
Yeah. I can tie this all together, actually, with what you said about Bombadil, because early on in my marriage, Emily would tell me about her bad day, and she was really successful at making me feel her emotions. And I'm like, man, as you're talking, you're upset, you're making me upset, and I don't want to be upset, right? And then I realized that what she really needed me to be is like Bombadil. When he comes in calm, he's controlled, right? He's got gravitas. He's like, he knows who he is, and he doesn't allow the woman or the people to pull them into the anxiety of the situation, like kind of like Edwin Friedman sort of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's what a man has to develop. When he starts developing that gravitas, when he's in the room, he's at ease with himself, but he's also present. So there's a level of stoicism, not stoicism that's emotionally devoid and can't connect with people. And what I slowly learned is I just had to be there, listen to her. Like I remember once she told me, I kept going to this grocery store and these carts are all messed up. There's not a good one. So I think, go to a different grocery store. There's a lot of them, right? But what I realized is she didn't want to do that. And she just wanted me to say, man, that sounds rough. That's what I'd say. And then she's like, yeah, it was rough.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, that's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a vocal artist named Jason Mraz. I don't know much about him.
Good.
But he has one song that I think is a really good one. It's called Frank the Fixer. Have you heard of that one?
No.
It's about his grandfather.
Oh, that's cool.
And in the course of the song, it's basically my grandfather could fix anything. And there's a point in the song where he's talking about his grandmother and how his grandfather handled his grandmother. And it's a fascinating song to listen to. You can listen to it on YouTube, but it shows, I think, this very thing that we're talking about. You just described.
Yeah.
Because Frank the Fixer was able really to fix anything, including grandma. But it wasn't in the way that you might think.
Yeah.
Well, basically, husbands need to work on being a thermostat and not a thermometer.
Right.
That's right.
So
yeah, that's a good analogy.
If you're a thermometer, you're just going to register the temperature of everything that's going on. But if you come home, you just set the thermostat. I want to be calm, cool, and collected, and everybody else can read that and take assurance from it.
Mm-hmm.
Be reassured. From it, which is again the kind of thing Bombadil does. He comes in and everybody's reassured.
Yeah, well, and Goldberry, his wife, she's she assures the hobbits that you're going to be okay because she doesn't say you're in my house. She says you're going to be okay because you're in the house of Tom Bombadil.
Right.
He's the master.
And this is like with community building. This is why Christians need to be this calm, confident influence in their community, where we know Jesus is going to win. Well, God is good. We have joy that no one can take from us, right? And I think a lot of community building is just getting involved in being the sort of person, being the Bombadil in the situation, whether it's in your HOA or your city council or local entrepreneur groups. When you get together and there's these guys that are calm and happy and have wisdom and don't get pulled into whatever the issue of the day is.
Yeah. Why are you not freaking out?
Yeah. Why are you not freaking out? I think everyone respects that. And that's what people want. They want steady. How do we fix this problem? They want solutions. And if we start raising men up that are like that, that's the key to getting cultural change happening. Like, because we send those guys out and they bring that mastery with them. They bring that confidence with them. And everyone wants that, especially in a fatherless society.
Over the last couple of years, when we've been in the middle of this pandemic panic and the lockdowns and the masks and everything, we've seen this happening where churches that refused to close down, churches that stayed calm, that didn't participate in the panic, I have been experiencing astounding growth. People want to be where the leaders aren't panicked.
Yeah, the church I serve in Vancouver, Washington, we have new people every week, and
Right.
it's largely because of what you just said.
As we are grappling with and trying to get a better understanding of how God actually made the world and what men actually want and need to be, were created to want to be, and what women actually want from the men and what they want to be, in the grip of an egalitarian dogma, people will come and say, well, what role do the women in your church have? Right. And they're thinking of it as time on stage, or, how much do they get to read the scripture? Or do they get to, when the case is far advanced, when the problem is far advanced, why can't they preach? That sort of thing. And if it's milder, they'll say, well, what role do the women have apart from the potlucks and the ladies' fellowship? It seems to me that the answer is, well, they're building a civilization.
Yeah, right.
Right. And what godly women want is, so if you have a service where the men have a role, where the men lead, where the men are confident, where you have that, it's not, oh, look, the men got the big piece of pie and the women have the small piece of pie. When you give that to the men, you're giving something profound to the women. That's what the women want.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I was downstairs. We had a women's night and it was hosted at our house. And I was downstairs watching Goonies with the kids. Got to be careful with the 80s movies. Just let me preface that real quick. But they were done. So I came upstairs into our the room all the women were in, and I walked into a cloud of femininity. Right. Like hair was flowing, dresses were flowing. There was laughter everywhere. And it was overwhelming because it was there was a sexual energy in the air that people don't understand. It's not erotic. It's just femininity. It's beautiful. Right. And then that right away, I knew we were doing all right with our men. Like we can always grow. But when you create a space for women to be safe, to be feminine, you see that sort of joy. They've all made all these different, snacks and all these things. But I think that's when men are leading the service of leadership, right? That's a big deal. One way I can help my wife is just make decisions for her. They have little decision fatigue throughout the day with kids and all that stuff. When I come in and make decisions for her, like I remove that from her and give her leadership, that's a huge service. So I say, if by servant leadership you mean actually leading and ruling and making decisions, I'm with you, but I don't think that's what you mean. So in our church, when the men are leading, what we do is we make a space for women to be feminine. If you think about it, that's what you have in Proverbs 31 that people don't understand, is that's not a careerist. That's not a careerist woman. Look, she has money. What, you think we don't give our wives credit card? What are you talking about? But it also isn't like a sort of 1950s reduced housewife, at least the idea of what that woman was. Right. What it is a guy, he's done well to build a place, right? To expand a boundary and and she's in there, she's refining it. He's giving her all these resources and she's able to magnify. Like I always think in the sexual act, we give a woman a little bit of sperm and they give us a person, right? You give a woman flour and she gives you bread. And so what is the place of women? Well, like you said, they're building civilization. Your problem is that you think of household in a small way. And I remember hearing Chandler say, when you get home from work, you should go do the dishes. Your wife's been at home all day with kids. Okay. Well, first off, I've been working all day, and it's kind of.
What do you think I do for a living?
I don't know, but
Nothing.
what the subtext is that home is not where you want to be, right? The subtext is that she's been here, and you get to go out into the world. Now we're both tired, and you definitely want to help each other. I have no problem helping with the dishes or whatever. You know, it's my house, and we're in this together, but we have to elevate the household. And when I was studying Proverbs 31, I called up our friend David Talcott. He said, do you know who Chris Wiley is? No, don't know who Chris Wiley is. So I bought your book and I was like, thank goodness. I don't have to try to write a real pathetic book. You've already wrote a good book. So
I thought you were going to say a real pathetic book.
no,
Wiley's got the pathetic book covered.
But when we have that idea of a productive household, a place of hospitality, a place of business and commerce and all that stuff that women are involved in magnifying what their husband's given them, that question that they ask that the complementarians, the egalitarians are obsessed with becomes stupid.
Right. Well, one of the things I think, we can do to kind of understand what's going on here is, at Christmas, when kids open their gifts, if you got a kid who's like unhappy with his or her gift and spends all his or her time looking at the other kid's gift, what you do as a father is you don't take that gift that you gave the other kid and give it to that kid. Right. You say, you got something right there in your lap. That's pretty cool. Do you understand what it's good for? I think a lot of women are like that. They've been given a gift and our broader culture has told them it's worthless.
That's right.
So now they're like, well, I want to have a cool gift too. He's got a cool gift. I want that gift. Right. And what they're actually trading for that gift is something that, is really valuable, really beautiful, and it's something that men, by their natures, can't have.
That's right.
Now we got a lot of guys who pretend to have babies, right, who are doing the tranny thing and all that kind of weird stuff. But women actually have that gift. It's a marvelous gift. Only they can do it. And I think women who are most content and happy are women who understand that they've been given a beautiful gift and they get into it.
Let us never forget that women are the kind of people that people come out of.
That's right. That's right.
It's kind of scary. It's kind of scary when you think about it.
Right.
Even though there are things that women do that men cannot do, and shouldn't try. Men can enable the women to do it, protecting them from the snark of the world. So for example, you just stay home and bake cookies. Yes, and the husband says yes, and gives those cookies to immortals.
Yeah,
right.
People always ask me, "What does Emily do? What's your wife do for a living?" I say, "Oh, she's a household executive," and they always go, "Oh, that's impressive," and I just kind of roll with it.
Right.
But usually, what I ask,
or does your wife work?
Right,
more than I do sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and again, that demonstrates the contempt that people feel for the household.
Right,
absolutely.
So, in Ephesians 5, it says, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church." One of the things that love does is it bestows loveliness. The experience you talk about with walking into this room full of women who were secure in their femininity, right? Yep. That experience came about because there was a city wall. There was a buffer, and the buffer is oftentimes a little gnarlier, uglier, colder, tougher than that which it protects, right? And that's what the men are supposed to do, provide and protect. So when the men are doing what they ought to do, they're providing a zone, a safe space, within which women can flourish. And when men provide, they bring home the paycheck. What they do is they give something to the woman, she glorifies it and returns it to him.
Yep.
Right. You give her a little piece of paper and it comes back as a Thanksgiving meal, or the child. The man makes love to a woman and she gives him
it's amazing.
A son, gives him a daughter.
She's a field. She's a field that a husband cultivates.
Right.
And she magnifies the things
That's a hate crime right there.
I
said something similar.
Well, there was a line, and it's good to be a man, and someone named Brian said, "Hey, we've had lines like this before. Maybe rework this one a little bit." So we did.
When you have a masculinity fail or femininity fail, or oftentimes they both fail at the same time, or the failures reciprocate, they feed off of each other. What happens is that everybody's left standing around not knowing what to do. Non-believers, people who've bought into the secular vision, can go off and try and find their inner self and I'm going to become a girl, or I'm going to go do something. I'm going to just drink the Kool-Aid and go. But Christians have this internal restraint that keeps them from going to the absurd lengths that the world does, but they're left absolutely uninstructed about what they're supposed to do. And so they just flail helplessly.
Yeah. We say, as a man goes the household. As a household goes, so goes society. Right. And so you have this time where David's not really being a very bold leader, which he messed up with his family quite a bit. And so he's getting old, and Absalom goes to the city gate and he says, "Hey, I'd argue your case. I care about you, you know." And he shows all this love for these men. And then it says, and this is how Absalom stole the hearts of Israel. Right. And so his method, his stratagem was good. It was actually really good, and we can learn from it. But he was a evil patriarch. And a point that we're always trying to make is that there is such thing as the evil patriarch. After all, the devil is a father. He's the father of lies. So even though that patriarchy is inevitable, it's a feature of God's cosmos, there can be evil manifestations. Just like heterosexual sex is normal, but there can be evil manifestations. Yeah. If we don't get this right with men, it blows apart the households, and households are the basic building block of society. And I think that's probably why in statism, they zoom in and attack men. I think about Pharaoh, right? So Pharaoh is an evil patriarch. So he kills the firstborn daughters or the firstborn sons. The firstborn sons are the heads of the household of the future. And he tries to break them different ways, pacify them with hard labor. And we do that with video games by keeping these men weak. Porn removes a man's sex drive to get a woman and build awesome things. It's a way to keep them enslaved and calm. I think E. Michael Jones, he's not a friend to the Jews, but he's got some really good arguments when it comes into the purpose of pornography from a state level. So what happens is there's only so much authority that God delegates, and nature hates a vacuum. And when men are weak and they don't exercise their authority, the state gobbles it up. And now we have this huge nanny state that's telling us what we can do in worship.
And because we don't go to the scriptures for our blueprints, for our marching orders, we have all these plane crashes, marriages blowing up. The wife starts reading I'm a Victim books, and let's say she's got a husband who's an ordinary sinner schlub, not an abuser, but he's just an ordinary sinner guy. And all of a sudden he becomes the enemy. The marriage blows up, churches blow up, and we don't have anybody who can come in after the plane crash and analyze the black box. Mm-hmm. We don't get any official report afterwards. This is what happened. And that's what I think we're trying to recover, of being able to say, this is what's happening. This is why your marriage is on the rocks. This is why your church is on the brink of folding, because we've shied away from and have been embarrassed by God's creation design instructions. Amen. Chris, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that was really fun to learn as I looked into the story, sort of Bombadil, is how he wins Goldberry. Mm-hmm. There was actually a poem that was written in the mid-30s entitled The Adventures of Tom Bombadil that appeared in one of the papers at Oxford. And so it's actually older. Tom is actually older than The Hobbit. Right. Yeah. So, and in that story, we see that Tom can't be caught. Everybody's trying to catch Tom. So, the Barrow Wight tries to catch him. The Badger tries to catch him. Old Man Willow tries to catch him. And Goldberry tries to catch him. There's this fun scene where he's looking into Withywindle, the river, and I think this is a flirtatious behavior. She reaches up and grabs his beard and pulls him in, And so he's under the water, and then she kind of goes away. You know, she's sort of swimming down, you know, to her home, you know, at the bottom of the river. And Tom says, "Oh no, you're not going to catch me. You know, I'm not going to live with you." And then later on, he catches her, holds her tight, says, "You're going to be my wife," and then takes her home. So, and then she's caught. One of the things I think you see in that particular episode is kind of these sexual dynamics between men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that Goldberry was attracted to Tom, and it was mutual. And this actually also ties into what I think is kind of the backstory for Goldberry that Tolkien was drawing on. There's actually sort of a kind of part of this whole water spirit dynamic. One of the particular water spirits, if you catch her, then she had to become your wife. So the issue, I guess, with pursuit, you know, who's doing the pursuing? I think a lot of guys, when it comes to the question of how do I win a wife, they almost behave like women in the sense of sort of preening and prettying themselves up, you know, and all that kind of stuff, and the hope that the woman will catch them. This is weird stuff. This is not the way it actually works. It works the other way around. And this doesn't mean the creepy stalker guy.
Right.
You know, we're not talking about that. But there is a kind of godly pursuit of a woman that I think reflects well upon a man. And if he pursues a woman in the right way, he can win the girl.
Faint heart, fair lady.
That's it.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. So I think that getting to the question of what should guys do if they want, you know, to establish a household, is you got to go out and find a good woman, and you got to pursue her and win her, and then you can have the kind of household that we've just been describing.
Yeah. Amen.
Final thoughts?
I'd rather you find a church that causes you the pain of benevolent discipline than buy my book. Right. My goal is to help men in the way that I've been helped by other men. And when you get to, you know, we talk about the concept of a bastard, which has been lost in our culture. It's just a cuss word. But it used to be shameful not to bear your father's name and everything that name represents. Right. And so we have people, men in particular, that are fatherless, and they don't know how to become a man because they don't have fathers. And the church is commanded to love the widow and the orphan. And in a sense, an orphan is very similar to someone that is a functional bastard. And so what I would tell anyone is that to grow in manhood, you need the church, right? You need the gospel. You need God's love as your father, right? There's your validation you need. But in terms of practically living out manhood, sermons that sting, you know, like you got to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. It's old Puritan idea. And so I think what we really need is churches that are bold enough to say things that will ruffle the feathers. Men are weird. Like when you rebuke them, they love you more for it, right? Like over and over again, the more you hurt a man in like, it's like a coach, you know, I had a coach that would push me so hard in wrestling, and I finally got, Foster, you can wrestle for me. Like that was like it the whole season, but man, it meant everything. And he just wanted the best out of you. So I think pastors, if you can push men without barking at them, right? Like inspiring them to greatness for the glory of God, they're going to respond. And that means as men, you have to have correctability. If you read Proverbs, the main thing that comes out is that you're getting wisdom because you're allowing people to correct you and improve you, and you have the humility to accept their correction of older, wiser men. So my last thought would just be, find a church that does that, a church that loves you and loves you enough to cause you some pain, because all discipline is painful for the moment, right? But it produces the peaceful fruit of righteousness.
Right. Final thought I would leave with, it would be whether you're seeking to build a broader culture or seeking to build your own understanding of what it is to be a man, or a godly household, or building a church community. There are two things that I would leave everyone with. One is that it is absolutely necessary to live in such a way as to draw slanderous accusations. If you're not drawing those accusations, you're not getting close to it. And it's equally true. The second thing is it's equally necessary for those slanders to be slanders and not actually true. Right? So if you're not accused of hating women, you're not doing your job. If you are actually hating women, you're not doing you're being disobedient. This wouldn't have been true in 1952, but now it is absolutely true. If you build an orthodox, godly marriage, household, church, whatever, you're going to be accused of these things, and you have to be absolutely willing for it. And you also have to be resolved that none of it is the case.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, the statement, beware when all men speak well of you.
Right.
It seems like there's a whole outlook in the church today where that's the goal.